This is 2006 Chevrolet Silverado. It has a 1.5 by 2 inch suspension lift, and we want more tire clearance, so we're going to put a 2 inch body lift on it. Well, let's get into it. The body kit we're going to use is manufactured by Zone Off-Road. They're not a sponsor. We paid full price for this, just like everybody else. It's got some pretty good instructions with it. It's got some pictures, which pictures always help in my opinion. It's got all the hardware labeled, warning stickers for your truck. Looks like the bed blocks there, your bolts, and all of your hockey pucks. This is just a 2 inch lift. The fan shroud has to be relocated, so it has a fan shroud relocation kit here. I think these are bumper brackets. It's got a few things, handy little parts to help you get the truck raised up where you need it to get for tire clearance. You don't get any ground clearance by adding the body lift, and 2 inches gets you from having to relocate any of your brake line brackets or anything like that, your gas filler neck. You don't have to relocate any of that stuff. It's just a small lift. But it does give you more clearance from the body, from the frame, so you can run a little bit bigger tires. But it's just for looks, really, and bigger tires. It has nothing to do with giving you clearance for off-roading. So I wouldn't recommend it for that unless you're just going big all the way around and need tire clearance for mud. But let's get started and see what this looks like. To get started, you disconnect the battery. Remove all of the pins that hold this cover plate on. I think there were 7. Next, remove the clips. This just had little squeeze clips on it on the grill. There's 4 on the grill and then 1 on each end of the little T-piece. Once you got the clips removed, it removes the grill. Next step, there's 4 mounting bolts on this radiator support that holds the transmission cooler on. That looks like pins there. We'll just take the bolts off on the sides. Take these 2 bolts and these 2 bolts and set this cooler, transmission cooler, back out of the way. Now that he's got the 4 core support bolts out, we have to remove it from these transmission clip lines and pull the whole thing forward out of the way. Now that it's free of its clips, you can lay the whole entire transmission cooler forward out of the way. Next, remove the air intake tube, removing the clamps on both ends. Next, remove the 4 fan shroud bolts, 2 on each side. We wound up not having to take the 2 outer bolts off yet. There's just 2 that hold the fan shroud on. I believe this fan shroud has got to be relocated because when you raise the body up off the frame, it loses its lower mounting clips. So we'll see more about that as we get into it. Once the bolts are out of the fan shroud, lift the fan shroud up out of its seat that's down in there, the clips on the bottom. We thought it had something to do with the lower clips. Once you get the fan shroud out of its nesting place, you got to go to the firewall and remove that ground strap from the engine to the cab, because we're going to be raising the cab up. That must be removed. Now Matt's going to turn his steering wheel and get that bolt. Oh, back up just a little. Hold it right there. Nope, toward the sewing room. Hold it. Lock it right there. Okay. He just needs to be able to get to both sides of that bolt. He's got to take that bolt out right there on the steering shaft. Hold it right there. That's fine. Now Matt's got the shaft marked in line. He can remove the bolt and separate them. Next thing you have to do is take your wires loose on your fog lights if your truck has them. This has aftermarket, but it's still got to be removed. And Matt's going to show you a bracket.
On your bumper here, 1, 2, and 3. And that comes right off, and you got to take it off on the driver's side and the passenger side.
Underneath the core support, there's 4 clips that hold the wire loom on. You have to remove the wire from the clips and remove the clips completely. They will not be reused. And Matt's removing those right now. He's underneath the core support taking those loose. I did say in the beginning this was a 2-inch body lift, but I was mistaken. This is actually a 1.5-inch body lift. It's kind of universal. It fits the 2003, 2005, 1500 2 and 4-wheel drive, and the 6 and 7 Chevy GMC 1500 2 and 4-wheel drive. And this is a 2006, so it should fit this truck. There's a few little things we're seeing in the instructions that are slightly different on this truck, but it seems to be working out okay. Next step, because this truck has a bull bar, you'll have to take the necessary steps to remove the wiring for the light that's on it and the bull bar if you have one that's equipped with it. Then you have to go through and take these 4 bumper bolts out that hold the bumper on and remove the bumper. When you get the 4 bolts out of the bumper and you get the bull bar off, 15mm bolts, the bumper should just slide right out the front. There it is. On the driver's side, behind the front tire on the frame, there's 4 brake lines in a clip. There's only 2 of them left in this clip, but you need to pop those up out of the clip. Then go to the next step. Underneath the driver's side cab, you have to find the connector on the emergency brake cable, pull it down till you get some slack in it, and put vice grips on the cable to hold tension, and then take this clip apart. We had a lot of trouble getting that clip apart, but you have to get it loose, and you have to remove it through this frame out on the driver's side by the driver's footwell, because you have to be able to get slack in that brake cable whenever you get the cab lifted up. We've got it loose, and now we're moving on to the next step, where you have to take the front core support bolts out. Matt's took them out here, and they go in there on that mount under the core support on either side. And that bolt, we're going to replace them with new bolts. Now he's got to take the 6 remaining cab bolts out, and we're going to lift the cab from either side. He's actually going to just loosen the cab bolts, get slack in them. He's not going to take them all the way out yet. We'll remove the passenger side first and lift it up, make sure we don't have any tension on any wires, and then we'll set it back down on the new lift bushings. You put the new bolts in, not tighten them, and then repeat the process on the driver's side. We'll try to get all these bolts loosened up first, see how it's going to go. Now, Matt's been taking the body bolts off this truck. It wasn't easy. There's 3 bolts on the side of this cab and 1 in the core support, 4 on each side. In the middle one on both sides, the capture nut that's up inside of the body spun. They come loose from the weld, and of course the body mounts ain't much counting either. But anytime you're going to do these Chevys, even the later model Chevys I've been reading on the internet, that capture nut the weld comes loose. I think the 2008 and later have got a hole in the floor that you can go through, but you have to take the seats and carpet and everything out. Matt just cut a hole in the body, and he's going to show you here in just.
All right, here's our hole we drilled in the back side of the body mount, and up inside there is the nut that broke loose that you can't get to, and it's a 21mm.
All right, we've got one of our spacers in here on the front, And Matt's going to show you the ones under the cab. Now we've got this side done. It's time to move on to the other side. We're going to leave this side loose, just have the bolt started. Now we're going to lift the other side up. You can see what a difference just standing here, standing level. It's up a couple inches on that side, and that's sitting on the mounts. So we get this other one on. We'll take a look at it. Let me make sure I can get it out of the garage. Yeah, it ain't gonna be no problem. All right, I've got a block of wood on the jack. Matt's under there watching the truck go up. We're going to raise this side of the cab now that we got the other side lifted. It's groaning and it don't want to cooperate. I hope the jack don't pop out from under it. How much further?
Keep going. It ain't even lifted off yet. Now it's starting to lift.
Okay, make sure you ain't got no cable stretching. Watch that jack. I'm going to look at these brake lines up here. They don't seem to be catching anything. Now that we've got all these hockey pucks in, the 1.5-inch hockey pucks, we've got all our bolts started and the body back square on the chassis with the hockey pucks in it. Now we got to go back through with red Loctite and take each bolt out one at a time and put the Loctite on it. And the 12mm bolts that goes in the front core support, they torque down to 65 foot-pounds, and the big 14mm bolts that goes in the 6 body mounts, they torque down to 90 foot-pounds after we get Loctite on them. We get all these torqued down, then we'll come back. Get this truck back together, do everything in the reverse. Now, one thing I mentioned in the beginning, we took this fan shroud loose, but I didn't notice in the notes that it said if you have an electric fan, you don't have to take the fan shroud loose or relocate it. So we cut the wiring harness across the bottom of this shroud, and we took the bolts out of this shroud, and it was totally unnecessary. We took this charge tube off, and I don't think that really had anything to do with anything. It would have moved because it's got a flex in it. And now Matt is putting the steering bolt back in, and I'm not sure if we even needed to take it apart because it has
slides.
He said it slid out enough, but where we had to overlift it to put the bushings in, that may have been a factor. So we're putting that back together, and that should take care of things under the hood. He's already bolted the transmission cooler back on to the fan shroud here, or to the core support. And next thing we'll be doing is this truck you have to modify the bumper bracket. So we got to cut the lower part of that bumper bracket off and drill some holes in it. This has wound up not being easy as what it said. It said it was a skill level 3, which it probably is a skill level 3, but with an older truck and rusty bolts and rusty parts, it's going to take you a lot longer. Plus we've been filming and we've been stopping and starting, trying to get this thing together. But it is lifted, at least the cab portion of it is anyway. And we're going to do the bed tomorrow under daylight. It's getting really late tonight, and we need to get it fixed where we can at least back it out of the garage. But we got to do some modifications on the bumper. I'm not sure if we're going to do that tonight or not. They got to be cut. New holes drilled, new bolts put into the bracket. We got spacers that goes in on these frame horns. Then we got to reposition the bull bar and get it lined back up. And some more brackets that we got to drill. We got to adjust the headlights down. This is way harder than the last one I done. The last one I done was a newer truck and it had bolts. It was easier to get out. And I didn't take any of this stuff off under the hood. It just simply lifted up. And it was a 3-inch lift, so I had to extend the brake lines and the gas filler. But none of this other stuff had to be moved. So, well, I think a few of the steps we've done, which is my own fault, not reading the instructions very good, but we're getting closer. as we get closer to modifying this bumper, we'll come. Okay, this is the bottom of the bumper on the inside, and this is the bracket. And Matt is going to modify. He took the clips off that were on there from the factory, and he's going to cut this whole entire lower bracket off on both sides, and then we're going to use that bolt hole to make an alignment mark for another clip and drill some holes. But he'll get these chopped off of here real quick with a cutoff wheel. The instructions say you could use a hacksaw, but I can't imagine anybody using a hacksaw for this. You're going to need something better like a cutoff wheel, maybe a plasma cutter. We're going to chop them off with this cutoff wheel, and we'll be back just a second. Matt's got those brackets cut away, and now he's got to put this bracket in this hole and put a bolt in it and tighten it up, or at least get it snug. Then he'll use that bracket as a template to drill his second hole. Okay, now he's got his bracket folded on. Matt squared his bracket up with the top bracket. He's going to take a 7/16 drill bit and drill through that to line his other bolt hole up. With all the holes drilled and bolts put in, the two brackets are on. Now we've probably got to tweak this bumper a little where it's been bent. Now that we got everything lined up where it's supposed to be, the bumper probably won't line up. So we got to try to fix this tweak over here. See what we can do with it. Now that we've got the new brackets on the bumper, you can see just exactly where they go. You got 4 bolts that holds the bumper here. Try to get where the light can see it. The bumper's on the truck like that. It sits right on, and the top mount goes over the top, and the bottom mount goes under the bottom. You put your 4 bolts in that supplied with the kit. And everything lined up. So far, all these brackets is lined up on the bumper. Now it says in the instructions, where are those L-shaped brackets? Have you got them on the truck?
Yeah, I can take it out, but
No, you don't have to. What we're going to try to do is get a look at it. These brackets here, that's hard to see. You got any light under there? Now this is the bracket. The first bracket we took off the bumper is this one. You can see where Matt's hand is. There's 2 bolts. And then there's 1 bolt. Now if anybody had seen this in the beginning, this is actually upside down. What they wanted us to do was take and go up 1.5 inches from these 2 bottom bolts and drill 2 new holes and put new bolts in. What we decided to do, since the brackets were 1.5 inches offset, we just flipped them from side to side and turned them over, and that gave us our 1.5 inch lift that we needed to make it line back up with the bumper. It should pull the bumper right back in place where it belongs without having to drill any extra holes here. So we got out of a step. Made it a lot easier. Anybody that put one of these kits on should be able to remember that. Instead of drilling holes, just flip your brackets side to side, and you don't have to drill any holes because they work out perfect. Well, there it is with the grill back in place. The filler panel, the bumper, somewhat level. It's pretty level. We had a bent bracket on this side where the bumper's been hit, but we got it as straight as we could get it without doing major modifications. Now we got to try to fit that bull bar in there, and we might have to cut a little bit off of the plastic. We're going to see how it goes, but that's the cab and front end of the truck pretty much finished. And we're going to wait till daylight tomorrow and raise the bed up, and it's pretty straightforward. Just has a few little blocks that goes in. But that's what we said about the cab, and it's turned into a nightmare. But I'd say it's probably going to take 2 people if you decide to do it, and you need to be prepared to take your time with it. Even without filming, it still would have took us a while. We've been working on this a little bit. We're almost done. It's been a couple days. We're back on the Silverado and got the cab and everything done. But you can see there's a big difference in the bed and the cab. So we got to get this bed lifted up. Got a few, don't like any of the bolts come through the bed. I'm not having one of these late model beds off. We're going to raise this bed up to make it match the cab. Get started on that. Alright, let's see what happens. Well, the very first bolt he tried to take out was so rotten that it's spinning inside of the channel, the little capture nut. Why Chevrolet does this, just tell us. Nobody knows. I guess they want a shelf life on these trucks for about 8 or 10 years, and they want them to go to the dump and buy another one. We can't do that. We've got to stretch these trucks as long as we can. But we still want to get this lift kit on it. So Matt got in there and welded to the capture nut, and it just pulled the frame or the metal off. So that didn't help nothing either. So we're just going to cut that bolt and move on to the next one and see what happens. But that's what happens when you work on these older trucks. It doesn't matter if it's Chevy, Ford, or Dodge. You start taking body and bed bolts apart, and you run into these rotten bolts. We'll keep moving on. Well, there's a welder, cut-off wheel, air hammer, 50,000 pounds of dirt, grinder, more dirt, welding wire, 4 or 5, I don't know how many bolts out of this bed out of 12. Half of them Matt's had to cut and grind, and he had to drill holes in the channel to get up in there and weld the nut back in place, the capture nut. And it ain't easy. If your truck is more than 10 years old and you're going to put this body lift on, you're going to pay a price. And this truck has very little rust in it other than the rocker panels. The rockers, but the cab mounts and everything, get some pictures, the cab mounts are pretty good, the bed mounts. But for some reason, where he's been having to work at, that one's all rotted off. He's had to weld and cut and weld. We want him to be able to get a nut back on that because it twisted and run completely out. But we'll probably fabricate some kind of block to put in there. But this went from a skill set of 3 to a skill set of 5 immediately. And we're still not done. And while all this was happening, meanwhile, in the closet over here, the water heater busted. So we went to get another water heater, and while the truck's going on, we're going to be replacing the water heater also, which I intend to film, I suppose. But right now, let's get this truck wrapped up. Finally managed to get all the bolts out. We got this side raised up. And got 3 of the blocks put in, and we're going to have to fabricate something right here because that bolt never came out. We'll probably cut that bolt off and just put bolt the block right straight to the frame, put it under it just for support. Then there's a little square tube block that goes right here. So that's got this side done, but not the bolts in, tightened up. They're loose. Matt has brought the jack around to this side, and we got a little block of wood, and we're going to jack this side of the bed up, hopefully repeat the same process, and I think we can get all 4 bolts back in this side. It's not damaged too bad, but we'll see when we get there. Last thing we got to do on this bed, Matt's got all the bolts and spacers in. We've got to put these little square tubing blocks, 1.5 inch blocks in. And there was a rubber mount here that just kind of isolated the bed. You take that rubber mount off, you use that existing hole. You take this little self-tapping screw and you tap it with it. And I've got the hole tapped with the screw now. I'm going to set this block in here and attempt to thread this bolt in through the side of this block. And I know it ain't going to be easy. probably take two hands, so I'll probably come back in just a minute. I've got the little 13mm self-tapping screw in the spacer on the cab mount, or the bed mount, I guess. So Matt's running the regular hockey puck bolts in. You can see one there, they got Loctite on them. He's running those up with Loctite and torquing them to spec, and this bed and this whole job should be finished. We'll come back when we get everything wrapped up. Well, here it is, finally finished. 2006 Chevy Silverado with a 1.5 and a 2-inch suspension lift, and then a 1.5-inch body lift. And it was a royal pain to get that body lift on there. We got all of our body lines back square. All of our hockey pucks put in around it. And it's night time again. 2 different days we've had to spend the whole evening, and it's just been a challenge. Matt's been under this truck
Show them how high it is.
for days. It's higher than it was.
It's almost as high as a big country ram.
Yeah. It's pretty high. It's got a little gap back here by the bumper. He's going to put another bumper on it. It sits up pretty good. It's bright with them lights. He's got his bull bar and his lights. And the cab mounts was amazingly straight, so the body line is nearly perfect all the way up the side of the truck. It's hard to see. It's real dark. And we've been trying to deal with this and deal with our water leak at the same time on the house, so Matt's got this finished up. It's done. That's all we got for this. You can follow our instructions on putting one of these, what's that brand, Zone body lifts on, 1.5-inch body lift, and see what it's like on a real world truck, and not in some garage with a lift somewhere where they got ideal conditions and a whole crew that works behind the scenes. This is what it's like for real people to put on real body lifts, and it was hard. It's never been hard before, but you got to get these bolts was all rotted and rusted, and they were almost impossible to get out. But if you like what you see, you like our content, subscribe to our channel. We would appreciate it. Like, share, tell your friends to come to these channels. There'll be more like it. If you got any advice, or if you have anything you'd like to tell us about what we did wrong, put it in the comments. We don't care for criticism. We don't mind it. If we done it wrong, we want to know about it. Our next project on this truck is going to be putting rocker panels in. You can hardly see them. They're ventilated. The truck is in relatively good shape, but the rockers is just gone, and we've got new rockers for it.
Cab corners.
Yeah, and some cab corners. But it's, for it be a 2006 model, it's pretty good shape. Bed's a little rough. Frame's good. Drivetrain's good. He's done a lot of work on drivetrain that we've not filmed.
Also needs to be tires.
Yeah.
With the 2.5-inch or the 2-inch lift and the 1.5-inch body lift, I just measured my space in between my wheels and my tires, and I've got about 3 inches back here and up front on clearance. Got about maybe 2.5, almost 3 inches back here, and up front you've just got 2 inches.
May have to be a little bit of trimming right there, and maybe some trimming on these cab corners. Probably not. He's not going that much bigger with his tires. If he goes with 3-inch bigger tires, they'll only be at a 1.5 bigger, closer. So they may work out okay. If he keeps the same rims, his offset's good too. So should be all right. He ain't got it like those roller skate wheels that most people put on that dish out. These wheels will look good with some bigger tires on. That's the whole point of putting the suspension or the leveling kit and the body kit on it anyway. Well, that's all we got for tonight, and thanks you guys for following along. It's been kind of a long build, but it was well worth it. The truck looks good now that it's all set up where it's supposed to be. Good, clean truck, and we used every letter in the alphabet of language to get this thing put back together, but it's done. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay clean.